Yo, welcome back to another episode of Into the Flu. In today's episode, I want to talk specifically about deck building. So I've got some really cool Wizards of the Coast resources here with me to help me do that. I'm going to talk about what I usually do when I first build a deck and, some of the decks that have come already pre-built by Wizards of the Coast. So I'm going to set these ones aside and just focus on this right now. So this here is a little handout that came in one of these starter sets. And if you look on this side here, you can see a list of the cards. So it's the card list here, and you can check off the cards as you get them, for your collection. It also has the starter set, the Draco and Hermione decks that came in the original starter set, Adventures at Hogwarts, Chamber of Secrets, and then it has the Twin Trouble and Percy, which are these right here. For those of you who own them or have not seen them, that's what this looks like. This is the Italian version, but nonetheless, the art and everything is the same. The cards as well. This is the base set. That's what that one looks like. There's also a Diagon Alley that I'll pull maybe and show you here in a little bit, but that's not the point. The point here is on one side of this, you'll find the lists that you can have for the cards, but then if you turn it over, you'll find this really cool kind of pre-built sort of handout that Wizards of the Coast, of course, provided. And it says here, don't try this until you learn how to play the game using the starter set and playmat. And so the playmat that they're referring to, of course, is this one here. And so this playmat, I won't be able to unfold it entirely so you can see, but I'll post a picture. I think I have a couple pictures of this on my Instagram, but it's really, really big. I mean, it folds out into a whole play mat where it shows you where to put your deck and where to put your lessons and all that kind of stuff. And it's pretty cool. I don't actually use that format in terms of like where I put my cards when I play the game. And I don't think, a lot of people necessarily do. It doesn't matter so long as you have a place for your deck, a place for your discard pile, and then your starting character needs to be visible, and then you have your kind of playmat here in the middle. So whatever orientation you use for that is really up to you. But let's see what it says. So one of the most exciting parts about Harry Potter trading card game is building your own deck. That is true, aside from actually playing the game. Okay, so you build your own deck using cards you get in the starter set, theme decks, and boosters, as well as cards that you trade with your friends. Again, very, very true. Building a good deck is tricky, but using these guidelines can help you start dueling in no time. So let's see what they've got here. So how to build a deck. So your deck has to have 61 cards, 100%. So 61 cards, one of them being your starting character and 60 being the cards that you're actually going to be using, moving around in your hand with the deck itself. So here they have a number, 26 lessons and 34 other cards. That doesn't need to be, that's not necessarily accurate. If you ask the seasoned player, they might tell you that 26 lessons is a bit too much. They might tell you that 26 lessons isn't enough. It really just depends, right? It's 100% up to you. This is just a guideline. You do with this what you want. And again, I'm going to share with you along the way what it is that I do. So just right off the bat, I can tell you that 26 lessons is a bit too much for me. There is a deck that I have, I want to say that has something like 24 lessons, 22 lessons, something like that. And a lot of that is because I use them to discard in order to do damage to my opponent. And that's because Crab and Goyle is my starting character, where you can use an action, discard 2 cards to do 3 damage to your opponent. So again, this here is just a guideline, and that's all any of this is anyway. Again, like the playmat that I was just talking to you about, this one. These are just guidelines. Do what you want as long as you're within the actual rules of the game and you're not breaking any of that. So step 2, and this is cool because it kind of gives you a place like put your starting character here, and then these are going to put your cards, whatever. In order for them to print this out and give it to you, they have to have numbers in order to make it easier for you anyway. But as you build decks, etc., you'll kind of realize like, oh, maybe that's a little too much or whatever. So step 2, choose 2 of these class types for your deck. So you can choose Care Magical Creatures, Charms, Potions, Quidditch, Transfiguration. A good idea is to pick class types that with your favorite cards. So again, choosing 2 is great, but you don't have to choose 2. Some people have monocolored decks where it's all Transfiguration cards. Some people have 3 tricolored decks where, like I have a deck that's really fun, and it's a Quidditch, Transfiguration, and Care Magical Creatures. Now, granted, The Quidditch cards that I have in there do not require lessons because it is a Hooch starting character. So Hooch's ability, or Hooch provides a Quidditch lesson power. So, but nonetheless, there's still 3 different lesson type cards that are in the deck itself. So we'll go to step 3. Choose 15 cards from your first class type. Choose 15 cards from your second class type is step 3 and 4. So you should try to pick some cards that need only 1 or 2 lessons to play. A lot of cards that need 3 to 6 lessons to play, and only a few cards that you need 7 or more lessons to play. Remember, you can't have more than 4 copies of any one card. Absolutely. So we'll go to step 5. So you'll need a total of 26 lessons. So choose 13 from the first lesson, choose 13 from the second and put them here. And then now step 7 and your final is you need 4 more cards for your deck. So it's a good idea to use adventure cards, but you can also pick an extra character to put into your deck and you put those 4 there. So now it says, now you're ready to play. After you duel with your deck, you may find that you want to take out some cards that aren't working well and put in some new cards to try out. As long as your deck has exactly 60 cards plus 1 starting witch or wizard, and you don't use more than 4 copies of any one card, except for lessons, of course, you can have kind of as many as you want in there. You can tweak your deck as much as you like. Remember, the best part of trading card game is being able to put any card you want into your deck. So start experimenting. So this is a really great way to start building decks for those who have not built decks before in the past, or for those who are just kind of looking at deck lists, whether it's me putting them in the deck dungeon that I have in the Into the Flu Discord, or if you're finding the deck lists elsewhere, or you're trading with some friends. That's really cool. But if you want to start building your own deck, you can do it by way of this. But again, this is just kind of a guideline. So now we're going to look at some other handouts that Wizards of the Coast created. So this is advanced rules here. Don't read these rules until you've played a few games with the rules on the playmat. So again, that's talking about this here, this playmat here. Because as you play on the playmat, you'll notice there's a lot of words, a lot of rules, a lot of kind of instructions. And yeah, it just kind of makes it easier for you, especially when you're getting right into it. If you want to just learn how to play the game, you know, I do have a couple videos on my channel where it just shows you how to play the game without having to get one of those play mats and all that jazz. But, you know, I leave it entirely up to you. So the advanced rules are pretty cool because they talk to you about location cards, kind of introducing some of the more advanced cards, if you will, matches, for example, when to use them, you know, them being like a mini game within the game itself. Adventure cards, kind of talk about adventure cards. So it's not just spells and lessons and a character. It's not just that. You know, you can do so many more things. And then they kind of introduce like power cost and high power cards, right? Items are back here. You know, so this is pretty cool here. And then it talks about steps of your turn and all of that jazz. For those of you who have not picked up a magazine yet, I do have all of these instructions that I've used, these advanced rule little booklets, as well as some of these other ones to make sure that everything is like 100%. If you don't have one of these, you know, of course, if you want to find one, you can find one. But for those that want like the actual rules, you know, written out, I do have that in the first issue of the Into the Flu Harry Potter TCG magazine. And then they go through the glossary of like what the different ones are, and then frequently asked questions. But the cool thing about these is, you know, it does give you an idea of the different types of cards. If you want to try a little bit more advanced stuff within your deck. And then this here is kind of the same thing. Don't read these until you have a few games. I just like the art on this one. The Basilisk, the only kind of time that we really see that for the Harry Potter TCG. Anyway, so we've got learning the advanced game. So, you know, with this, I think they're really just referring to, because if you look at the starter set, the decks are actually 40 card decks in the starter set. That's this one. And so by adding in more cards, you know, you're sort of advancing yourself in the game, and you're able to have an actual deck, which is 60 cards with one starting character. A total of 61. So yeah, you know, so this is just kind of like a good, you know, a good way to a good way to sort of start getting into it. But let's just talk about specific to deck building and what it is that I personally do. And let me bring a deck out so you can see. Okay, so here we have one of my favorite decks to play with. This is the Pomona Sprout deck, and it's a themed deck. So what does that mean? That means that there's a general theme within the deck itself that is either has to do with the starting character and who they are within the wizarding world. It has to do with the house that the starting character is in. It has to do with some kind of thematic structure that you want to bring into the deck. And so in this case, it's a plant deck because Professor Pomona Sprout is, of course, the herbology professor. So that means that her starting character ability says each of your plants has 2 or more health. So if we look within the deck, we'll find that there's a lot of cards that are plants because I want to keep with the theme of my starting character. And anything else that comes by way of like auxiliary cards, etc., it's just to help advance me in the game and help my cards do a little bit more. So I could have kept it with just Care Magical Creatures, but I wanted to add Transfiguration because I know historically that those 2 lessons work really well together. And so by having a Care Magical Creatures lesson power that Professor Pomona Sprout provides, she already takes care of that for me. So all of the other lessons in here, you'll notice, are Transfiguration only. So that means that I don't need to have Care Magical Creature lessons in this deck because she provides that power already. So I make sure that in keeping with the theme, every creature that I have is actually a plant. And some of them aid with my health and some of them actually do damage. So we've got umbrella flowers, we've got leaping toadstools, cobra lily, which does damage, but it is a plant. You'll see that up here. Some more leaping toadstools. Mandrake is going to be like the heavy hitter that's in this deck. And then we've got some of the other ones just kind of repeating there because as we read in here, you can have up to 4 of the same card unless it's a unique. A unique card, an example of that would be Hedwig. You can only have 1. So we've got the plant cards that Professor Sprout are controlling because she's an herbology professor, and that kind of goes with the theme. And then again, just because I like the way that Transfiguration cards work with Care Magical Creatures, I've added some of those in here as well. And then in order for me to use those cards, I obviously need to have Transfiguration lessons. These are my proxies, so I got like a proxy Mandrake, you know, all that kind of stuff. Playing with proxies is totally cool because sometimes, you know, usually I'll print them out, but sometimes the cards can get a little expensive, and so, you know, you want to be able to build as many decks as you want, and making ugly proxy cards is something that you should probably do. All right, so like Steel Claw, for example, all your creatures do damage to your opponent. That's a really good Transfiguration card that works well with creatures. Obviously, it's specific for creatures. And then in addition to Steel Claw, I also have a Swarm, which is a Care Magical Creature card anyway, but it's count the number of creatures in play and do that much damage to your opponent. I think Steel Claw and Swarm work really well together. And then I just have some other kind of, you know, Transfiguration cards that mess with my opponent. Lost Notes allows them to discard an item or a lesson card, and then Dobby's Disappearance. For those of you that don't know, choose one of your opponent's cards in play and return it to his or her hand, and you get 1 more action. So it's essentially having them return one of their cards to their hand, you know, sort of free, if you will. And the rest of the cards are just, you know, some adventures, etc. I have the whole deck list itself in the Discord if you want to see it. But just to go back to actually building the deck itself. So, I wanted to make a thematic deck. A friend of mine, him and I were talking about, you know, doing something similar together. So what we ended up doing, you know, was saying, okay, well, we like plants, we like Professor Sprout. and there are plant cards in the game, and Professor Sprout is a starting character. So combine those. Once you combine those and you end up getting the plants that we've talked about, then you can just start adding in the auxiliary cards that are going to help you achieve your victory. So for me, I said, okay, well, Transfiguration and Care Magical Creatures work well together. So since we don't need to have any of those lessons, because she provides a lesson power, we're only going to have Transfiguration. And so that's what I've done. And the Transfiguration are the rest of the cards that I have in here, along with some adventures. So I usually don't necessarily think of a specific number of lessons, but I'll say, let's say about 5 different spell cards, and then I'll have roughly 4 of each of those, right? So that's 20 cards right there. So I'll say, okay, well, I know that I'm going to have some spell cards, so let's choose about five different spell cards. We're allowed to have 4 of each of those. So then you add those. In this deck, I have 20 lessons. So I'll usually say, okay, 20 lessons or 22 lessons. It really just depends. And there's nothing specific that depends on. It just kind of happens to be like if I'm building a charms deck and it's only charms, then I'll probably have 20 lessons, because it's a monochrome deck. And sometimes, like in this case, because she provides the 1 power, I start the game with 1 lesson no matter what. And if you noticed, Leaping Toadstools only requires 1. So off the bat, if my first hand has Leaping Toadstools, I can play this without having any lessons in play. So, having 20 has worked out for me. I haven't needed to have like 22, but sometimes, you'll build a deck and then you'll notice, oh, well, it really took a long time for me to get my lessons stacked up, and I didn't end up getting to these cards, and these ones over here aren't really help anyway. So you'll end up switching out some of your adventures or locations or spells for those lessons, and that's totally fine. So I'll just say, you can start when you build a deck, you can just start by choosing a starting character. That's usually, what I'll do. Like with my Crab and Goyle deck that I mentioned earlier, I had never had a Crab and Goyle starting character deck, and so I was like, well, I want to build one. So I start there, and then you can go into figuring out which lessons and all that kind of stuff you want. Now, if we take a look at this other deck that I have, this is Snape. So Snape provides a potion lesson power. So in this whole deck, I don't have any potion lessons. So I knew that I wanted to have it double lesson color. So I've got potion, I have charms, so that's 2. And in here, all I have are charms lessons. And then I've also got a wand shop, which is an important card, and it helps in making your lessons worth double the amount. So all charms lessons provide 2 charms instead of 1. And again, like I've done deck text on this one and the other. So the whole point of this is I knew that it was going to be both of those, and they were surrounded by 2 cards specifically. Those 2 cards being Venomous Tentacular Juice and Dobby's Help. So because of that, I needed to make sure that I had at least 4 of each of those, right? So 4 of each of those. And then the rest of the deck is assisting me in making sure that I can get these cards out. So that means the wand shop, which helps, and then the charms lessons. Now, you might think, oh, okay, well, since these are really expensive, you're going to need a lot more lessons. But in here, I actually only have 18 lessons, and that's because I will admit I am relying heavily on the wand shop, which I have 4 of in this deck. For the most part, I'm able to pull the wand shop without an issue and play it. And the wand shop only requires 4, and so that's pretty inexpensive. But let's say that I can't get the wand shop, right away. Well, that's where you have to be smart in terms of building your deck to where it could assist you. And that's why I have something like Green God's Vault Key. Search your deck. You may take any card from your deck and put it into your hand, then shuffle. So let's say that I accidentally, I notice that my opponent is doing damage to me, and now my wand shop is discarded. Well, we have Reparo for that. So put a non-healing card from your discard pile into your hand. And let's say that it's not even one shop. Let's say that it's actually the Venomous or the Dobby's help that I need. So when you build your deck, you have to make sure that you either understand, is it a starting character that I want to build my deck around? Is it a card, a specific card? Like in this case, these two cards that I want to build my deck around. And then what is it that I need in order to assist myself in getting these cards? So they're both pretty expensive, 9 and 10, right? So that's why wand shop, like we talked about. If any of these end up somewhere I don't want them to be, we have these two cards that help out. And then along the way, we've got some cards like Potions Project that have your opponent take damage until they discard 2 lessons. We've got something like Bullseye Potion, which is really expensive, but you're already kind of getting up there. So you might as well do some extra damage if you can. And this is 13 damage. Hover Charm, which is kind of the same as Dobby's Disappearance in its own way. Choose one of your opponent's cards and return it to their hand, essentially. So I might not be doing a whole bunch of damage directly, but the whole point of this deck is to deck out your opponent. So by way of Dobby's Disappearance, which has them draw 10 cards, and then Venomous Tentacular Juice, which has them draw twice as many as they have in their hand. So if you got a Bullseye Potion and they're doing 13 damage, they already have less cards in their deck. And so the whole point of that is to deck out. So, what I've done with this is I say, okay, well, I know that Professor Snape is going to be the starting character because it provides that one potion, but also helps me with healing. But mainly because it provides the potion, and I only want to use only one lesson type in this deck, and it's got to be Charms because of the wand shop. And because it helps me in getting really expensive cards out sort of faster, because it helps in essentially making one lesson worth 2. So if I have 4 Charms lessons, then that's 8, plus this one is 9, and then bam, I can play this, So then the rest of the deck is really up to you. Like, what do you want? I don't want to be stuck with an adventure, so I've got Flying Car, which helps me use an action to choose an adventure or location and discard it. Again, we've got the Potions Project. Bundamum Ooze is good in case I'm playing against someone who has some pretty gnarly creatures, all of that stuff. And so when building a deck, I don't want to sit here and give you some, rigorous formula that you need to follow, because I don't think that that's very fun. But building a deck really requires you to just ask yourself, what is it that you want? What do you want to see in the deck? What is it? What's the point? And if you have no idea where to start, then start with something easy. The easiest combination is probably Care Magical Creatures and Transfiguration. It doesn't have to be anything thematic like we talked about with Sprout. It doesn't have to be anything like this. It can be as easy as like a handful of creature cards and a couple Steel Claw or a couple Serpent Sorcia or anything like that. Or it could just be a monochrome deck where you just do nothing but creatures. I know someone who has a deck that has 30 Care Magical Creature lessons, and the rest of their deck is just, the other 30 cards are just low-costing creatures. And a lot of the low-costing creatures, especially from base, you'll notice require you to discard or return to your hand a lesson in order to play it. And so having those 30 really helps them, because they need all of those in order to continue recycling so that they can play those cards, but they're going to be doing damage and stacking them up. So, if you wanted to follow something like what we talked about earlier with this little handout, you're more than welcome to do that, but you don't have to follow this equation. You might notice that 26 lessons is too much, or if you've got a deck like James, who I mentioned earlier with the creature deck, he's got 30, around there, and he kills me almost every time we play. So, it's one of those things where you gotta have fun with it. You can choose to, but you don't have to. That's why I just say, follow it loosely. But if you want to follow it just to start, you're more than welcome to. And you can choose 1, you can choose 2, you can choose up to 3. I would say 3 is pretty advanced, because you have to make sure that your lesson management is really good, and you have to make sure that your starting character helps you with that. But, for the most part, if I am going to leave you with anything, I would say choose your starting character wisely and choose 20 lessons. The rest of the cards have a combination of locations if they fit, definitely throw in some adventures and then spell cards. Play one game, and then you'll notice right away if 20 lessons is too much or too little. It's probably going to be too little, too few lessons, if you will, and then you can move up from there. Some people start with like 24 lessons, and that's totally fine. But as long as you have 60 cards in your deck and one starting character totaling 61, and the starting character has to be a witch or a wizard, so it can't be Griphook, it can't be Hagrid, unfortunately, it can't be Peeves, can't be Argus Filch. It's got to be a starting witch or wizard, which you'll see down there. And then just start combining the cards. If you're going to have transfiguration lessons, you have to have transfiguration cards. You can't have charms cards in your deck that only has transfiguration and care magical creature lessons, for example. So the cards have to match the lesson type, obviously, but that might not be obvious for people who haven't played, which is why I'm saying it. If you want to get into the league, you can join the Discord. I'm going to link it in the description below. Please feel free to bring your deck. I'd love to play with you, give you some pointers. I'm by no means, a super competitive player or anything like that, but I play games pretty much weekly. So, I'm able to provide a little bit of input if you want, or just to play and have some practice is also going to be a good place for you to do that. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. There's so much, there's so much to building decks, but there also isn't at the same time. So don't be intimidated by it. Just build the decks as best you can. If you don't have the physical cards, feel free to print them. I know it's not as fun. I know it's not as cool. Sometimes they can be pretty expensive. If you have like a few cards that you're looking for, hit me up. I'd be more than happy to send them to you. If I have an abundance of them, I'll send them to you free of charge, of course. You just would pay for the shipping if you don't mind. And then, just play some games. So no big deal. If you have any questions, like I said, just hit me up. You can hit me up on the side at Harry Potter Morrissey on Instagram. You can leave a comment below and I'd be more than happy to help. And again, if you don't want to go through the trouble of actually building a deck on your own, I do have a few decks for sale. Just some, like simple kind of starting decks. But if I can help in any way, as always, let me know. And more importantly, have fun and be safe, and we'll catch you in the next video.